Okay, let us get ready to go so we can cover as much material as we have. I figure it'll take about 2 hours tonight. Now, after hearing that, when I tell you about an hour and 15 minutes, doesn't that sound good? Nobody's mad at me now. You say, oh, that's great, Lowell. You see, if I go over 15 minutes. All right. Let us now just do a little bit of reviewing to bring us up to speed here of where we are. Let's keep in mind on this first chart right here that in Acts chapter 22 and in verse 21, Paul had some plans. Now, he was over at Ephesus and he wrote to the Corinthians and he told them what his plans were. Now, as he told them, he said, what I want to do is to come over and visit you over there at Corinth there. Then I'm going to go down to Jerusalem to take this money down there. And then after I visit Jerusalem, then I'm going to come back up and go to Rome. But what really happened right in there is that if I take that off, why was it he didn't go straight down to Jerusalem? Why was it I take it off and put that around? He had to go back up and around. You remember? There was a plot for his life. If he got on the boat to go down there. So he went around, went down to Jerusalem, and then he says, now, after that, I'm going to Rome. Now, that's his plans. Now, that's what he's going to do, but it's not going to be anything the way he thought it was going to be. And so I just throw that out to you to let you know that God does carry this out, but it's in a totally different situation than what you would think it would be. Okay. Now then, let's put our cities back up here again, and we're going to run through them here on the third journey and see where it was now that Paul went on this journey. He takes off in here. Now, that's, of course, the second journey that we've got that he goes around. And as he went around on the second journey, when he got over to what city, he wrote 1 Thessalonians. What city was it? It was in Corinth. That's right, chapter 18, verse 5. And then he wrote 2 Thessalonians in the same place there at Corinth while he was there. Then we take off on the third journey. And as we come up there, it goes through Galatia. And then he comes down to Ephesus. He gets down to Ephesus and he writes the 1 Corinthian letter. He wrote the 1 Corinthian letter for two reasons. You remember what those two reasons were? Questions they had. They wrote him a letter. And then something else. The what? All right, the household of Chloe had come over and told him about all of this big mess that they were in. So he sat down and he wrote the 1 Corinthian letter. He sent it over with whom? Titus. Told Titus they had some pre-arrangement made that they would meet in what city? All right, they're going to meet in Troas. Paul goes up at Troas when they're supposed to meet. Was Titus there? No. So Paul was so worried that he left the work. He goes on up, going through Macedonia, and who does he find up there? Titus. What kind of report did Titus give him about the Corinthians and the 1 Corinthian letter? Great, just tremendous. So he sits down and he writes the 2 Corinthian letter, and this is that highly emotional letter then that he writes at that time. He tells them to get their money ready because he's going to come down, pick it up, and it's going to be money that he's going to take where? Going to take it to Jerusalem. Okay? Paul then goes on down to Corinth, and while he's at Corinth, he writes a couple books. What are they? Okay, he's going to write the Roman letter and the Galatian letter while he is down there then. So now then we've got these letters starting to fall together. 6 of them that are there. Now, he was going to go straight down, but he has to go back around because of the plot. He goes back up to Philippi. The rest of the people goes on over to Troas. And who does he pick up at Philippi? All right, he picks up Luke at Philippi. They go on down to Troas. And that then is where they had the Lord's Supper there that we studied about. Then he went down to Miletus, and he called for the elders at what city? Ephesus. Why didn't he go up to Ephesus? Only 20 miles. Right, he's trying to get down to Jerusalem by the day of Pentecost. So he's down there then to Miletus. Now, that is where we're picking up our story today then. And he's getting ready now then to leave there and go on down in that particular area and on down to Jerusalem. Now let's take a blank map unless you give me the cities. He takes off from where? Antioch, goes up to where? Okay, up to Derbe. Some of them in there, the Phrygia is the country that they would be in. Then he goes up to Galatia, over to Ephesus. All right, everybody get with it. Up to Troas, over to, okay, Philippi, Thessalonica, Berea. Okay, so since it says Macedonia, I just put it over in there. So he goes over in Macedonia. From Macedonia, it goes to Corinth. From Corinth, he goes back up to Philippi. Philippi to Troas. Troas to Miletus. All right, that then is where we're picking up our story then today. Now, from Miletus then, he's going to sail around and come around and land down there and go down to Jerusalem, and that will bring him to the end then of his third journey. There is the second journey, and you can see that they're almost overlapped. They would be just overlapped if it wasn't for that plot where he had to turn around and go back up through Macedonia, see? So the second and third journeys would be the same. So let's look at it now in this way again. He goes up here to Galatia. He goes over to Ephesus, up there to Troas, on over to these areas, comes back down, and he's getting ready to come down this way. Why didn't he come? All right, that's that plot. So he has to go back around to Troas and around to Miletus. Now, there then is where we pick up our story tonight. So we're down now in chapter 21. It says here, "And when it came to pass that we were parted from them and had set sail, we came with a straight course unto Kos." Now, here's a new map that I put up. So here's Miletus. So now he's going to come down to Kos. Now, Kos is just that little island that's right down there. So he comes down to Kos, and the next day unto Rhodes. Now, Rhodes is this island that's right over there where the yellow dot is. It's an island that's out there. And from thence to Patara. Now, Patara is on the seacoast up there in Lycia, so he's coming around in that way. Now, while he's there, he finds a ship that is going over to Phoenicia. And we've just put Phoenicia up here on the board right over here. This is Phoenicia. So he finds a ship that's going over there. So now then he's going to get on the boat there at Patara. It says, "And having found a ship crossing over into Phoenicia, we went abroad and set sail. And when we had come in sight of Cyprus, leaving it on the left hand, we sailed into Syria and landed at Tyre." So he leaves there and he goes around and that area and comes down and he lands at Tyre. That's where the boat is going to land. Now, we have to understand, on these boat trips, they had big boats. They had boats that would hold 500 tons. And these boats would hold 600 passengers. Now, the freight was the number one thing. Passengers were number two. They made their scheduling. This boat is going to go here and here and here and here. It's just like if there was a boat leaving Seattle and it's going to San Francisco and then to Hawaii and then to Japan. Now, if you want to ride on the boat, that's the route that you're going to take, see? So that's the way it was then. Wherever the freight boat went, that's the way they would go. So he finds one then and comes down to Tyre. Now, it said there they were to unladen their burdens. They're so going to unload. "And having found the disciples, we tarried there 7 days." So he goes up to Tyre. We're not acquainted with that church, but the area has been evangelized, and there are brethren there. So he examines around, finds out. He goes up, and he stayed 7 days. Why would he stay 7 days? It's a guess, but pretty good guess. Waiting for the next boat to leave. See, so you stay there then for 7 days. They had up there, and in verse 4, "And having found the disciples, we tarried there 7 days. And these said to Paul through the Spirit that he should not set foot in Jerusalem." Now, if you remember, let's skip back to chapter 20 and 22, verse 22. When Paul went into Ephesus, here's what he told them. He said, "And now behold, I go bound in the Spirit." That is, the Holy Spirit is making me go. I go bound in the Spirit unto Jerusalem, not knowing the things that shall befall me there, save or except that the Holy Spirit testifieth unto me, and in every city saying that bonds and affliction abide me. So everywhere I go, when I went up through Thessalonica and Philippi and Troas, there were prophets there, and they all warned me, you are going to suffer bonds and affliction when you get to Jerusalem. So he tells the Ephesians then, that's what is going to happen to me. Now then, over here at Tyre, they had some prophets, and these prophets there told him, said, don't go to Jerusalem in there because there's going to be trouble down there. Now, obviously, Paul does not take this as a command from God, a direct command of don't you set foot in Jerusalem, because he's already told the Ephesians the Spirit has told him to go to Jerusalem. Do you know why he felt that he had to go to Jerusalem? Why was it that there was such a necessity that he had to go to Jerusalem? Okay, if I went over to the book of Romans, anybody heard the book of Romans? Where was it written? All right, it was written down in Corinth, wasn't it? All right, now I'm going over to the book of Romans, and I'm going to read you in chapter 15 here in the book of Romans now. As Paul was there at Corinth, picking up the money, he comes down here, and he says this. He said in 27, yea, it hath been the good pleasure and their debtors that they are. In verse 26, in here, it's been the good pleasure of Macedonia and Achaia to make a certain contribution for the poor of the saints that are at Jerusalem. So we're going to go down there. Now, he says then, in verse 28, and when therefore I have accomplished this, when I've gone to Jerusalem, and have sealed to them this fruit, what would that fruit be? The money. I will go on by you unto Spain. So I plan on coming up, seeing you, then I'm going on up into Spain. Now, back in the first chapter, he told them that's what he's going to do. And he says, if I am satisfied with you, I'll let you pay my expenses from Rome to Spain. In other words, I'll let you send me on up, you see, if everything goes fine. That's in there. But I plan on going. Now, 29. And I know that when I come unto you, I shall come in the fullness of the blessings of Christ. Now, listen. Now, I beseech you, brethren, where is he when he wrote this? He's over at Corinth. Now, I beseech you, brethren, by our Lord Jesus Christ and by the love of the Spirit, that you strive together with me in your prayers to God for me, that I may be delivered from them that are disobedient in Judea, and that my ministration which I have for Jerusalem may be acceptable to the saints. So I said, now I want you to, when he's over to Corinth, I want you to strive with me. I want you to pray fervently for two things. Number one, when I get down to Jerusalem, I pray, I ask you to pray in there that, let's see here, where is it? That I may be delivered of them that are disobedient, that my life will be spared that's there, and that my ministration, what is the ministration that he had for Jerusalem? The money, all right, that my ministration that I have for Jerusalem may be acceptable to the saints. Now, here you have all these poor saints down at Jerusalem. Paul is bringing a massive amount of money down to them, and he prays to God fervently that they might accept it. What would be the reason they might not accept it? Too proud. They're Jews, and this is Gentile money. So Paul has to accompany this money to go down to there. So we'll see what happens with all of that. Okay, so he knows that he has to go. All right, and when it came to pass that we had accomplished the days, we departed and went on our journey, and they all, with wives and children, besought us on our way till we were out of the city. Kneeling down on the beach, we prayed and bade each other farewell, and we went on board ship, but they returned home again. So again they go out and they have this prayerful situation. 7. And when we had finished the voyage from Tyre, we arrived at Ptolemais. Now, Ptolemais is a city right south of there. For those of you in Wednesday night class, that town ought to ring a bell. What bell should it ring? All right, the Ptolemies were the rulers of that area that's up in there. And so they named this after them then, after the Ptolemies that's there. So went down to Ptolemais, and we saluted the brethren and abode with them one day. And on the morrow we departed and came into Caesarea and unto the house of Philip the evangelist. So they get back down to Caesarea. They come now to Philip the evangelist. Now, where was it that we last saw Philip, and where was he? Okay, somebody has been studying. Man, we got to get Todd settled down there. He's getting this thing mastered. Back in chapter 8, Philip had baptized whom? The eunuch, and then he went over on the coastline. He preached until he got up to Caesarea, and that's where he stayed. Now, that's been 20 years ago. And now Paul comes back down, and there he is. So he comes down, and they are entering into the house of Philip. Paul and 9 of his friends are there. Why would he have 9 friends with him? Why all those traveling companions? These are the ones that are carrying the money for the churches. All right? Who was one of the 7, we abode with him. Now this man had 4 virgin daughters who prophesied. So we might stop there, and that's all we know about them. Now what does prophesy mean? Speak by inspiration. So these women were inspired. Do you remember back in Acts 2 when Peter says, "This is that which hath been spoken by the prophet Joel"? Who is it? The Spirit is going to come down on whom? Old men and young men, and your handmaids and your maidens. See? Men and women, Jew and Gentile, the Holy Spirit is going to come down upon. Now, so then we had prophetesses, female prophets. Now, did we have female prophets in the Old Testament? Yeah, Deborah was one, and here now we have them here. They would be subject to the same ruling that all women were, that Paul had here, that they were not to be public teachers. But who would prophetesses teach? They'd teach other women. Could he ever teach men? Did Deborah ever teach men? Yeah, she took control, certainly, but it's teaching in a certain way. In other words, that you're not taking, domineering over them. See, that's the key that they have. Okay, so here then he has these 4 virgin daughters, and as we tarried there some days, there came down from Judea a certain prophet named Agabus. Where have we heard of that guy before? Okay, what chapter? Chapter 11. Okay, back in chapter 11, Agabus had come from Jerusalem, told him there's going to be a big famine there, and so the brethren at Antioch took up that collection back in Acts 11:27. So here Agabus is coming again now to meet him here at Caesarea. So the guy by the name of Agabus, and coming to us and taking Paul's girdle, that would be his belt, long belt that he had around him, and bound his own feet and hands and said, "Thus saith the Holy Spirit, so shall the Jews at Jerusalem bind the man that owneth this girdle, and shall deliver him into the hands of the Gentiles." Now, here you have visual aids. He comes up, he takes Paul's girdle, which would be a long belt that he would have there, takes it, ties it around his feet, ties it around his hands, and he said, now, so it's going to be when you get to Jerusalem. The man that owns this girdle is going to be bound by the Jews and given to the Gentiles. So Paul knows now that things are going to be tough when he gets down to Jerusalem. Well, for the first time, Paul's traveling companions try to talk him out of it. 12. And when we heard these things, that would be Luke and the others, when we heard these things, both we and they of that place besought him not to go to Jerusalem. Please, Paul, don't go. Then Paul answered, "What do ye? Why do you do this, weeping and breaking my heart? For I am ready not to be bound only, but also to die at Jerusalem for the name of the Lord Jesus." Now the Lord has commanded me to go. He's commanded me to go, and so I must go. Look back in chapter 20 and verse 23 there, where he said that he doesn't know what's going to happen except when he gets to Jerusalem. Problems going there. he said in here 23, save that the Holy Spirit testified unto me in every city, saying that bonds and afflictions abide me. But I hold not my life as of any account dear unto myself, so that I may accomplish my course. What was the course that he was to accomplish? Take this money down to Jerusalem. Even if it cost me my life, he told the Ephesians. Over here, they're begging him now, before he goes, don't go. And he said, why are you doing this to me? You're breaking my heart. I'm ready not only to be bound, but to die there for the name of the Lord. And when he would not be persuaded, he didn't listen, we ceased saying, the will of the Lord be done. So then they stopped begging, said, let God's will be done. And after these days we took up our baggage and went up to Jerusalem. And there went with us also certain of the disciples from Caesarea, bringing with them one, how do you pronounce that guy's name? Manson of Cyprus, an early disciple. So he's one that obeyed the gospel way back 27 years ago when the church was established, with whom we should lodge. So here's a man that lives in Cyprus. He has a home in Jerusalem. It's big enough to take Paul and his 9 companions in. So they go to Jerusalem. Now they have a place to stay. All right. He's made it back now to where he wants to go. So he got the money, and now we're getting ready to see what happened with that money and what happened to Paul. And when we were come to Jerusalem, the brethren received us gladly. So the prayers were answered. They were not mad. They didn't say, we don't want that filthy money. The brethren received us gladly. And the day following, Paul went in with us unto James, and all the elders were present. So he goes in, he talks now to these leaders, pillars of the church. And when he had saluted them, he rehearsed one by one the things which God had wrought among the Gentiles through his ministry. Now, he has already been to Jerusalem. He has already rehearsed what God has done with him from point A to point B. When was it that he was in Jerusalem and told these guys what the Lord had done with him? Chapter 15, that's right. Now, chapter 15, he had just come off of which journey? First journey. So he went down and he told them what happened on the first journey. So now, as he's talking with them, I'm sure he picked up the story there. He said, let me tell you now what's happened. And he told him about the other 2 journeys now, the big journeys here, that he has been on. So he rehearsed by one the things which God had wrought among the Gentiles through his ministry. So I've been all out in this Gentile country. And they, when they heard it, glorified God. So they were very, very happy. Now, right now, I want you to take that statement and pick it away up here somewhere in your mind, because I want to pull it out in just a little while. It's important for you to remember it in there. Cal, got it? Okay. He's the only one to probably forget this. Now, when he told them what God had done among the Gentiles in there, then they were very happy. Now, 20. And they, when they heard this, glorified God and said unto him, Thou seest, brother, how many thousands there are among the Jews of them that have believed. So how big is the Jerusalem church again? Thousands. When was it we were there the last time to know a little bit about it? It was scattered abroad. What chapter? What? Chapter 8, that's right. So it was all scattered abroad. Saul, this guy right here, Saul, had scattered abroad. Now then, there are thousands of Jews there. Or he said, now you know how many thousands there are among the Jews of them that have believed, and they are all zealous for the law. Now, these people are zealous for the law. Now we're going to have a teaching here about the law of Moses. And all these people are zealous for that law. And they have been informed concerning thee. There's rumors about you here. And here's what it is. That thou teachest all the Jews who are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, telling them not to circumcise their children, neither to walk after the customs. So, here's what they say then. They say, Paul, here's what we find with these people. Paul, here's what we find with these people. I'm going to have to do this and because that's not the one that I'm after. Right here, there's another, and I'll have to come back to this. Okay, here's the one I'm after. Okay, now I want you to notice what the charge was. This is very important. And we're going to get technical in this thing because many, many people charge Paul with sin. So let's get technical. Now, the charge was that you teach the Jews who are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses. That's what you're charged with. And here are two things that prove it. Here are the two things about it. You tell the people among the Jews not to circumcise their children. That's number one. And you tell them not to walk after the customs of the law. Now that's what we hear about you. That you are telling them to forsake Moses and do this. Now, they are going to make a suggestion to him. They're going to say, now we know that this is not true. See? That's the whole point that they're saying there. Man, we haven't had rain like that since we've been in the building, have we? Okay. It says in here in verse 5, or 22, what is it therefore? They will certainly hear that thou art come. They're going to hear you're in town, and there's going to be a lot of trouble. Do therefore this that we say unto you. Now we're going to make a recommendation to you. We have 4 men that have a vow on them. These take and purify thyself with them, and be it charges for them, as you pay the bill, that they may shave their heads, and all shall know that there is no truth in the things whereof they have been informed concerning thee, but that thou thyself also walkest orderly, keeping the law. So, we want you to go up to the temple and do this so that the people will know these are not true, but that you walk orderly and you keep the law. Now, there's certain things in there that sounds kind of funny that we got in here. But first of all, let's look at this. Did any New Testament writer ever tell anybody to forsake Moses? In Acts chapter 3 and verse 22, as Peter is preaching there, he's preaching and he said, now, all of this that I'm telling you about Christ and all of this, is in harmony with what Moses said. And then he quotes Moses. And here's what Moses said. It says, Moses indeed said, a prophet shall the Lord God raise up to you from among your brethren, like unto me. To him shall you listen in all things whatsoever he shall speak unto you. And if you don't, you're going to be cut off. Now, if you listen to Moses tonight, suppose I tell you, you're saying, I'm getting ready to leave. I'm getting ready to die. This is my last class. You say, Lowell, what can we do to be the kind of people we ought to be? And I say, listen to Moses. And I have a heart attack and drop dead. Will that work? It sure will, won't it? Because as you go back and you start listening to Moses, Moses tells you these things, and then what does he tell you? Look for that other prophet, and when he comes, the one like me, when he comes, you listen to him. Oh, okay. So we're going to go then and listen to Christ. So nobody ever said, forsake Moses. Now, did Paul ever say not to circumcise your children? What did he do in Acts the 16th chapter? He circumcised Timothy, didn't he? He circumcised Timothy, and why did he circumcise him? for expediency's sake, because of the Jews wouldn't let him get in their synagogues and so forth if he didn't. He didn't circumcise him for salvation. He had absolutely prohibited that of Titus, but he circumcised him. So Paul doesn't care whether the Jews circumcise their children or not. It doesn't make any difference in there. Did he teach not to walk after the customs of the law? Well, has he already written the book of 1 Corinthians? Okay, he has. Let me turn over to 1 Corinthians, the 9th chapter. Let's see what he says over here now in verse 19. For though I was free from all men, I brought myself under bondage to gain all, that I might gain the more. And to the Jews I became as a Jew, that I might gain the Jews. To them that are under the law, as under the law, not being myself under the law, that I might gain them that are under the law. And to them that are without the law, Gentiles, as without the law. So Paul said, this is where the old adage comes, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. When Paul was among Jews, how did he act? Like a Jew. He kept the customs of the Jews. He ate the Jewish food. When he was out among the Gentiles, what did he do? Kept the customs. Ate the Jewish food. So he never told them not to keep the customs. So the fact of the case is, this is not true. See, this is not true that we've got right in here. Now let's look at what Paul had taught. In the books that he had written concerning the law, he said you could keep the law as a custom to please the Jews. You see, in 1 Corinthians. He said the law was a tutor to bring us to Christ in Galatians. He said the Jews had been made dead to the law through Christ in Romans 7. He said neither circumcision nor uncircumcision is anything in those two passages. Now, he also taught, and this is the important thing, you cannot keep the law as a means of salvation. Now let me read you that in Galatians. This is a very important verse in here. Paul said he kept the law. When he was among the Jews, he did what Jews did. But now, as he writes to the Galatians are teaching you have to keep the law and circumcise your children. Remember? See, in order to be saved. So now he's going to fight that. Now here's what he says. Ye are severed from Christ, ye who would be justified by the law, ye are fallen away from grace. That's a very powerful verse. And there's a key in there. You are severed from Christ, you Christians. You are cut off from Christ. You're lost. You're cut off from Christ. Ye who would be justified by the law. There's the key. If you try to justify yourself by the law, if you try to say, I'm going to offer animal sacrifices, so I'll offer this blood to cleanse me of my sins, and I'll be circumcised so that I can be a holy person, if you try to keep that law as a means of justifying yourself, you're cut off from Christ. Now, think about it this way. Back here, Moses gave the law. The law was in play for 1,600 years. Circumcision, all these sacrifices and everything. Finally, Christ came. Christ died on the cross. Now then we go on over here. Now, I'm over here. Here's where Christ died on the cross. I'm over here. Now, I'm telling you, you have to keep the law of Moses in order to be saved. Well, if that's what I'm telling you, you got to keep the law of Moses in order to be saved. What had people been doing for 1,600 years? That's what they'd been doing, hadn't it? When Christ came, he died, and I'm still saying you have to keep the law And when I say you have to keep the law, what am I saying about Christ? He died for nothing. See, you got to go back and do that same thing. Christ died for nothing. I'm severed from Christ. So the key is, you can keep the law of Moses, but not for salvation. Let me ask you. Suppose that starting this week, I began keeping every Sabbath day. From here on, every Saturday, I will do no work. Is that okay? Certainly it's okay. Suppose that I tell you that in order to be saved, you have to keep the Sabbath day. No. Suppose from this day forward, I say I will eat no pork. Is that okay? Suppose I say, if you eat pork, you can't be saved. No, you can't do that, see? I can keep those laws. I can keep the laws of Moses as a custom, as whatever you'd want to call it, just as a national situation in some way, living among the Jewish nation. I can do that, but I can't do it as an act of salvation. Now, that's the key. Now, here it is. The whole point is it custom or is it salvation? See? So now, he's getting ready. They told him, said, what we want you to do now is to go up here and you do this. He said, I want you to show these people that you are not an enemy. Concerning the law, here it is. We have 4 men who have a vow. This was a Nazarite vow they had from the way that you read it here. In Numbers chapter 6, 2 through 12, it tells about the Nazarite vow. A Nazarite vow was one that any man could take. It was not a requirement. Very few people took it. But if a person says, I want to devote my life to God, totally to God, I'm going to become a Nazarite. What you did is that you let your hair grow so that you would look different from all the other men. And so you don't cut your hair at all while you have this vow. What is it you couldn't eat? Grapes. You can't eat them in any form, shape, or manner. From the skin, to the kernel, to the wine, to jelly. Can't have grapes any form, shape, or manner. Now, to you and me, that wouldn't be such a big deal, but how big a deal was it to them? That was a staple. That was everyday food that they had. So you're going to have to give up that everyday staple that you eat. And then you cannot be around any dead person. Even if your dad or mother dies, you can't go to their funeral. Because if a Jew is in a room around a dead person, they become unclean. Now, this is not unclean in the sense of sin. It's unclean in the sense of national uncleanliness, see? of a physical type of uncleanliness is what it was. And so, if he said, if something happened, and I have this Nazarite vow, and I've had it for 10 years, all of a sudden Oliver drops dead over there, I become unclean because I'm in the same room with him. I haven't sinned, but I become unclean. So now, the Jews had these rules they had to do. They had to go out, wash their clothes, dip in a what we call a baptistry, dip themselves in there, then go down to the temple, cut their hair, burn it on the altar, and then offer a turtle dove sacrifice in order to cleanse themselves of this vow. So these people had this vow. So now we've got 4 people that's up there that had it. Now, you can't cut your hair, can't touch any grapes, can't be around a dead body. So now, you have to go through the cleansing process to break it. Paul, if you will go up there and you will even pay for the sacrifices, let these Jews see that you will keep these things as a custom. See? You'll keep them as a custom. Paul's already taught if you keep them salvation, why it will condemn you. Then they'll understand that all these things that's said about you are not true. So, it's that custom or is it salvation? So here's what would happen. some things, interesting things are getting ready to happen. Here's a picture of the temple. Now, over here in that corner, can you read it, what that says there? It's the chamber of the Nazarites. That's where the Nazarites would go to cut their hair and stay there and go through the cleansing motions that they had. Now, Paul then is going to have to go over here to the court of the Israelites that's over here, bring a sacrifice for the priest for them to offer. This out here is the courts of the women. Out in here is the court of the Gentiles. Anybody can go in. Then there's a court of the women that they can go in here. Here's a place where they kept different things, oil that they sacrificed. Up here's a chamber for lepers, and over here's a chamber to keep the wood to burn the sacrifice in, and so forth. So, and then only a male Jew could enter right here. Who is it that could go beyond this in here? Only a priest. Only a Levite, only a priest. So Paul wouldn't be able to go beyond there. So he would come in, and he would go to these men that's down here. Then he would take the sacrifice, take it over, and give it to these people over here so that they could offer the sacrifice. So these other people would see, yeah, Paul isn't out trying to tear up the temple. He's not out trying to destroy this temple that is there. Now, he was teaching that it has nothing to do with salvation, but he's teaching that you can do these things. Now, as he's doing that, let's continue reading now in verse, in verse 25. These Jews that told him to go do this, they said, "But as touching the Gentiles that have believed, we wrote giving judgment that they should keep themselves from things sacrificed to idols, from blood, from what is strangled, and fornication." You ever heard that before? What chapter was that? Back in chapter 15. Now, I'm telling you, these James and these elders that's talking to Paul, they're not telling Paul, we want you to go in and make sacrifices for salvation. They're not doing that. See? When he came in and he brought that money in from the Gentiles, and he told them what he was doing out among the Gentiles, while Paul was out there, did he preach that they had to be circumcised, the Gentiles had to be circumcised? No. And he told them that. And these Jews were happy. They were happy. See, these are not, James and these elders are not these Judaizing Jews that's trying to bind the law. Now, down here, they say, Paul, we want you to show that you do keep these things like this, and you're keeping the customs and so forth. And as far as the Gentiles, we've told them what to do. And there's no circumcision in here. See, that's the whole point. So we know they don't have to be circumcised. 26. Then Paul took them in, and the next day, purifying himself with them, went into the temple, declaring the fulfillment of the days of purification, until the offering was offered for every one of them. So he goes in the temple. All the Jews see him go in there. He's not going in to tear it up, cause a ruckus. He's going in to go through his cleansing. And when the 7 days were almost completed, the Jews from Asia, when they saw him, what would the Jews from Asia be doing down there? What? It's Pentecost. See, it's Pentecost. So they all be doing. Now, when they were down there, you remember all of the tempest that the Jews of Asia gave him? All the problems that they had up there? All right, when they saw him in the temple, stirred up all the multitude and laid hands on him, that is, arrested him, crying out, "Men of Israel, help! This is the man that teacheth all men everywhere against the people and the law and this place." So they grabbed him. What's their charge? Here's a man, Paul, that goes everywhere teaching everybody against the people. Who's that? The Jews. Jews are no good. And the law. He teaches against the law. The law is no good. And this place, what place would this be? That's the temple. What did Paul say in the Roman letter? Has he already written a Roman letter? He has, hasn't he? All right, down in chapter 7, verse 12, He said, for the law is holy and righteous and good. The old law had all those. How many bad laws did the old law have in it? They were all good. Who was it that kept every law of the Old Testament? There's only one individual. Who was it? Jesus. And what kind of individual was he? Perfect. See? And so this is not true. These guys are lying about Paul here. Then it says, in addition to that, and moreover, he brought Greeks into the temple and hath defiled this holy place. So he's actually brought Greeks in here, and Gentiles can't go in there. If they do, they've defiled the temple. They must stay on the outside, out there where that Gentile court is. But he's brought them in. Now, what was their evidence? Well, look at what their evidence was. 29. For they had before seen with him in the city Trophimus the Ephesian, whom they supposed that Paul had brought into the temple. So last week, they saw him downtown, and he was with a Gentile by the name of Trophimus. And so, undoubtedly, he brought Trophimus in here. Is that a pretty big jump in conclusions, you see, to get to? Well, as you look up here, we've got this up here is the Gentile court all around. Now, Trophimus could even have been in this area according to the law, see, and everything would have been fine. But he was in the city. He was clear out away from the temple. But since they saw him with Trophimus last week, they said, he's up here. Well, you remember the tumult that was back in Ephesus over Diana? How they went crazy? They thought somebody had desecrating their god? All right, 30. And all the city was moved, and the people ran together, and they laid hold on Paul and dragged him out of the temple, and straightway the doors were shut. They closed the temple. It's desecrated. It's unholy. You have to go through a cleansing process. They are mad. They are really mad. And as they were seeking to kill him, that's how mad they are. They just kill the guy. That's what he's worthy of. So they were seeking to kill him. Tidings or news came to the chief captain of the band that all Jerusalem was in confusion. Now, this chief captain, that's the general that's over the whole army, the band that's in Jerusalem. Now, remember, they didn't have local city police. They had armies, and they would take cohorts of armies and put them in here. And so this guy in here, he's actually called a chiliarch. As you look for chili, you know the Roman, the numeral that would be, if you're talking about a chili, it's 1,000. An arch would mean ruler. So this is a ruler of 1,000. This is the big chief himself. And he hears about this. So he hears now that there is a tumult downtown. It came up to him. Everything's in confusion. And forthwith, or immediately, he took soldiers and centurions. How many centurions would he have under his command? He'd have 10, wouldn't he? See, under his command in there. And ran down upon them, and they, when they saw the chief captain and the soldiers, left off beating Paul. So they were beating him, trying to kill him, but when they saw the chief of police, the head of the whole army that's there, they left off trying to beat him then, at that time. Then the chief captain came near and laid hold on him and commanded him to be bound with 2 chains. Why would he do that? Why would he say, put him in cuffs, put 2 chains on him, rather than saying he's innocent until proven guilty? If you go down and there's one man, the whole city is in a tumult. The whole city is absolutely crazy. And people have this one man trying to kill him, and everybody's screaming. Do you suppose there might be some evidence that he's done something? So grab the guy. put him in 2 chains that's there. Now, as soon as he did it, and he inquired who he was and what he had done. So you got to give this guy credit. He said, now who is this guy and what has he done? What's he done to cause all this commotion? Well, look at their answer. And some shouted one thing and some another among the crowd. And when he could not know the certainty for the uproar, he commanded him to be brought into the castle. So everybody's yelling different things. So he knows that he now is not going to be able to get an answer there. So he said, take him up into the castle. Now, as you talk about castle, that sounds like something great, but let's look at the temple. And here is what you have right here. As you look at this in here, up in here is the temple. You see these 4 pillars that's out here? Now, this was a fortress that was built up. And Herod built that great big fortress, and he named it after Antony and Cleopatra. So he named it after Antony, and so it's called the Fort of Antonia. Now, it's not part of the temple, but it's glued right on the side of the temple. And who built the temple? Herod. Herod's the one that built this. So he put that there. He built it 20 feet higher than the temple. Now, he's got it right there so that he'd be up there and he can look down into the temple to see if the Jews are up to any orneriness. And he's up there to where it's in the central part so that he keeps his army in there. All the army is stationed in there. And if there's any tumult, then they can all run out. So that's a fortress. That is an army fortress that he's got right there. So there's where it would be. That would be the temple that is over there then. As you look at it again, this is a model city. You look back and you can see the fortress in there. You see of a model city that you got there. There it is. And over to the right then would be that. There it is again, showing you again how strong that the thing is built and so forth. Now, this right in here, I've cut it out so it's kind of blurry. I want to see what the picture looks like myself. Yeah, it's kind of blurry, but I cut out just that little section, blew it up. You see these great big stairs right here? Now, that's where this next action is going to take place. They're going to bring Paul around and take him into the castle. Now, how would you translate castle? They're going to take him into the castle. This is a good or bad place? This is a jailhouse. They're going to take him in. This is federal penitentiary. I mean, you can't get locked up any deeper than this, you see. So they're going to take him in and going to put him there in jail. So now, let's see what goes on then when he has this. Now, so he was, and when he had come up on the stairs, so it was that he was born of the soldiers for the violence of the crowd. So Paul has been beaten. They're trying to kill him. The soldiers have picked him up and they're carrying him. I don't know if it's because he's hurt so bad or just not moving fast enough or something. It's certainly because of the violence of the crowd that they're trying to protect him. And the multitude of the people followed after, crying, "Away with him! Away with him!" And as Paul was about to be brought into the castle, he saith unto the chief captain, "May I say something unto thee?" And that opened up a whole new can of worms. When he said that, and he said, "Do you know Greek?" He is amazed that this guy knows Greek, because he had already come to conclusion who this guy was. He'd come to the conclusion this guy is an Egyptian, and he is the mean Egyptian. He said, "Art thou not then the Egyptian who before these days stirred up to sedition and led out into the wilderness the 4,000 men of the assassins?" Now, here it is that we have an Egyptian who couldn't speak Greek. Josephus tells us about this guy. He had claimed to be a prophet. He'd claimed to be the prophet. And he told these 4,000, he said, "You follow me. We're going to go up and conquer Jerusalem. And I'm going to stand on Mount Olives. And when I'm on Mount Olives, then I will work the miracle that will totally release you to capture Jerusalem. You'll be able to capture it. So he brings in 4,000 assassins. These are guys that trained to kill and do this. Well, they did a lot of damage. Of course, they were routed and put to the run. But now then, the Roman army would like to round this guy up. Here it is. You've got a leader of all this terrible group of people, and so they'd like to get this Egyptian and put him in jail. Well, when the chief police comes down, he sees the whole city in such an uproar, totally going crazy. He thinks this is the number one man on the FBI list. And who would that be? They've got that Egyptian. Chain him up. Take him in. So they're going in. He just like we are today, he knew about the Egyptian. He knew he couldn't speak Greek. And when Paul turned around and spoke Greek to him and said, "May I say something? You can speak Greek? Aren't you that Egyptian?" And then Paul said, "I am a Jew of Tarsus in Cilicia, a citizen of no mean city." What does that mean? I am a citizen of an important city. I'm a Jew, and I'm a citizen of an important city. Now, this is kind of name dropping a little bit, isn't it? You know, what was it that Tarsus was? Why was it an important city? It was a Roman city. That's right. If you were born in Tarsus, you were a Roman citizen. And so Paul, later on, he will be able to use this again and tell a guy who had to buy his freedom, he said, "I didn't have to buy it." He said, "I was born." You see here. So now then this guy knows this is a Jew. He's not the Egyptian. And he's a Roman citizen. So I have to treat him according to Roman law because this chief captain is a Roman. So I've got to treat him now according to Roman law. Paul said, "I beseech thee, give me leave to speak unto the people." And when he had given him leave or permission, stop. Why in the world would he do that? That would not happen in a million years today if there was a guy down here at one of these mass destructions that we've had here in Seattle, and they arrest him, and as they leading him up the jailhouse door, he looks up at the chief of police and says, "May I speak to these people?" And he says, "Yeah, go ahead." Can't conceive of it, can you? Can you think of any good reason why this was a smart thing to do? Well, does the chief of police know who he has on his hands? He didn't have the slightest idea. He thought it was this guy. Now it's not. Can he turn him loose? Doesn't make any difference who he is. Can he turn him loose? No. The whole city of Jerusalem is in an uproar. Can he ask anybody out there what he did? He's already tried that. He's exhausted everything he knows to do. So now, when Paul said, "May I speak to them?" what would he expect Paul to do? If you're going to speak, you're arrested. Suppose that you saw me. I'm handcuffed. Police has me handcuffed and shackled. They're leading me in the jailhouse. And I see you people, all of you down there. And I turn around and say, "May I speak to them?" Yeah. What would you expect me to do? Tell you what the deal is, right? And I'd say, "Brethren, I want you to know I did not rob that bank. I was not there." Now, what does the chief of police know about me? This guy's accused of robbing the bank, you see. In other words, I would let it out of my own mouth. So he now is, well, yeah, go ahead and talk. And undoubtedly, Paul now will say something in his defense to let this guy know what a bad guy he is. Now, this is the very beginning of a great big story that'll go through the rest of the book of Acts, all the way through the book of Acts. This is the beginning right here of this. And when he had given him leave, Paul, standing on the stairs, beckoned with his hands unto the people. And when there was made a great silence, he spake to them in the Hebrew language. Why would he speak to them in Hebrew? That's their holy language. That's their religious language. And so he's going to speak to them then. And he said, brethren and fathers. Why would he call them these two nice names? They just got through trying to kill him. Just like Stephen. His speech is going to be just like Stephen's speech. He's going to show them, I'm not guilty. I'm not a Jew hater. I didn't do what you said. I love you. I'm here because I love the Jewish people. I'm one of them too. So that's a defense that he is getting ready to make. Now, as we look at this, I want to go back up here to close out class tonight with this chart right here. And so let's go through it now. We'll go through the third journey in this way. We've started out here. We've come down in here that we've already seen. We'll get these cities in here. Over there was Phoenicia. I didn't get this map in the right order that I wanted it here. Okay, we're going to go back up here to Antioch, and we're going to take off on a journey. So there's Antioch. So watch the map, and then watch the dots as we go through. Now here's the cities I want you to remember. I'm not going to make you remember all of them. So, and that's just because I'm so sweet. I want to put that in so you'll understand that. Now, taking off from there. Now then, he goes up through Phrygia. Now Phrygia will take care of Derbe, Lystra, and Iconium. See, that's the country that is around there. Now you say, why Phrygia? Because that's what Acts 18:23 says. See? And so went through Phrygia, then up in Galatia. Goes on up there. So Antioch, Phrygia, Galatia. Then Ephesus. Goes over to Ephesus. Then up to Troas. From Troas, he goes on over into Macedonia. I won't take it off if you say Philippi, Thessalonica, and Berea, because you know that he went through there. But it says he went over into Macedonia. He's trying to find Titus. Then he went down to Corinth. We're not in where he wrote the books. We've already done that. Then he went back up to Philippi. Then from Philippi down to Troas. From Troas to Miletus. Then we start out with all of these other little places that you got around there, from Miletus to Kos, Kos to Patra, or to Rhodes, and Rhodes to Patra. So listen to what I'm going to do to you. Now this is because I'm so good looking, this one is. I'm going to let you get by with Miletus to Patra. In other words, you don't have to put down Kos and Rhodes, because he did nothing there. They just went in, the boat stopped, and went right on. So Miletus and Patra. Then from Patra, went down to Tyre, and then to Ptolemais, and then Caesarea, and then Jerusalem. So that'll be your third journey. Okay, guys, hand out the test. Class will be dismissed. What? Okay. In chapter 20 is still okay. Let me go back to this. It's still the third journey in chapter 20. So he's still going on the third journey. And what I'd like for you to remember out of this, in other words, you can put down third journey, but don't forget this is the one where he was at Troas and had the Lord's Supper, because you'll be using that over and over again. And then in chapter 21, arrival in Jerusalem. Arrival in Jerusalem. See, getting into Jerusalem. Okay, guys, go ahead and pass them out.